I am Amrita Das, your host for the day. We are gathered here to exchange ideas and discuss about various emerging topics in English studies. Yesterday, we already witnessed insightful ideas and concepts discussed by our esteemed speakers. Today, again, we are having a golden opportunity for each of us to enrich and enlighten ourselves. Without further ado, let's dive into our promising schedule. Our first speaker, Dr. Kalyan Chattopadhyay, Associate Professor at Bankim Chhardar College under the University of Calcutta. He has over 25 years of experience in English language teaching as a lecturer, trainer, researcher, and advisor. A University of Leeds and Hornby Trust alumnus, he serves as a global ambassador for Leeds and mentors teachers globally. He has delivered plenary and invited talks across various countries, including Cambodia, China, Indonesia, Japan, Nepal, Russia, South Korea, Sri Lanka, the UK, and Vietnam. He has delivered plenary worldwide and authored course books for Cambridge University Press and Collins. Recognized with awards like ELTREP, ELTRMS, IELTS Research Award, he has just published an edited volume on the role of industry academia interface in skill development, internalizing education policies from Rutledge. Please give a warm welcome to our first speaker. To chair the session, we have with us Dr. Sunil Shah, Professor in the English Department of Nirmal South Gujarat University. I request Dr. Shah to felicitate our resource person. Thank you, sir. So without further delay, we will directly move on to the session.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me at the back? Thanks for coming. For the next 40 minutes or so, I'll be taking you through some of the areas of English language teaching and research associated with it, because I'm told that most of you are either postgraduate students or research students and also faculty members. I can see some of my friends is like homecoming, meeting old friends, and also making new friends. So if you have any questions in between my presentation, kindly keep a note of it. We'll come back to you, and I'm sure that I will give you plenty of opportunity to talk about it. Because if you look at the title, I'm not just talking about innovations in teaching. So what sort of innovations in the last 3 decades we have seen, and what we are going to see in terms of teaching and research. So we are trying to envisage a future. But I will show you at the end that the future is also problematic. Problematic because of 2 reasons. One is our incapacity to visualize what is going to come. And another problematic area is the so much of hype we artificial intelligence and how it is going to shape our lives, our professional lives, our personal lives, and how these overlaps will actually change everything, as if a new era is going to come. Okay, so you will see the what sort of new era. I experimented a bit with ChatGPT in the morning, and I'll show you some pictures of it, what is coming up. So let us go through some of these things. The first, I'll talk about significant changes that have come over the English language teaching arena in the last 50 years. Now, can any one of you tell me a couple of changes that you have noticed as a student or as a faculty, that what has actually changed? 50 years maybe too much for students because we are not born, but maybe in the last 20 years, 30 years, what sort of changes, except technology, in English language teaching? Anybody? Any idea? Anything that you have noticed has changed?
Changing methods of teaching.
Changing methods of teaching. Can you? Yes.
The language we are using, especially the students.
The language. Yes. Yes. Okay. So language you are talking about. So when you are talking about the language, so that means the kind of language that we are acquiring. For example, many of us are using mobile phones, and there we are using lots of encrypted, abbreviated sort of languages. And also there are lots of code switching, translanguaging. We will be coming to that. Now, how these are getting transferred to pedagogy, meaning your students or you yourself in your personal lives, you are using all these things. And when you are going to the classroom, what actually happens, right? How these things are going to challenge us as teachers, right? And then we talk about curricular innovation. I will come to that. But one thing is very clear. If you look at the last 20 years, there is increasing writings in the newspapers. Also, there are deliberations in different seminars and other places that English should not be taught as a subject, as a content, but should be taught as a skill. Because many of us are working in institutions where our students are not coming to learn Shakespeare. They are coming to learn English language and the use of the English language, right? They are not bothered about Shakespeare, what new things have come out. No, I just want to write a letter, an email, and I want to write it correctly. Now the problem has come that ChatGPT is writing for you. So what is the role of the teacher? Right, think about it. We'll come back to these issues. Then teaching practices and also technology integrations. I'll come into details of it. For example, if you look at the theories, how the theories have evolved from the behaviorist theory, right, to cognitive and constructivist approach. Constructivist approach meaning we create, right? So I talk to you, and when I talk to you, I interact with you, we co-create the kind of language or practices. Then you know the famous input hypothesis of Stephen Krashen. I don't believe in Krashen's comprehensible input because there are occasions, plenty of occasions in our teaching career where we have not seen comprehensible input. We teachers have not been able to provide comprehensible input. Neither our textbooks are able to provide comprehensible input, but Stephen Krashen is very passionate about it. And you know that in Western theory, you will find from Bill Ashcroft to Stephen Krashen, everybody, they are passionate because see, when I have a post of professor of post-colonial literature, I have to create something. I have to become a canon. So I have to say something, post-colonial transformation, I have to say something. So today, Donald Trump is creating another kind of transformation. right? So after 10 years, somebody from the US university will come up with another sort of transformation. So this theorization will continue. So you are free to do this. Then Vygotsky's social cultural theory. So the kind of support you will give, how much support you are going to give to your learners, when you will withdraw your support, when you will reduce your support. So socio-cultural turn in social interaction in learning. These are the theories that we have seen coming up in a big way. Now, if you look at language learning theories, learning teaching theories, before 20th century, at the beginning of the 20th century, there was hardly a few things, right? The Greeks talked about the discourse. They didn't talk about grammar. And as I say, that Panini talked about grammar and the structural part of the language. Now, then when Bloomfield and others came, and then the English language teaching developed, because it's just a kind of a post-Second World War phenomena. You have lots of theories, and I can tell you very confidently that you will not get so many theories of language teaching in any other languages than in English. Maybe because of British Council effort, the UK government's effort to popularize English language as a kind of a soft skill, right? So that might have contributed to so much of writings and stuff. So, and when you look at curricular innovation, I've started with the latest one at the top, task-based language teaching. You know, who defined task? Can anybody tell me? Who talked about task? So many people have written about task-based language teaching, but who first talked about task? Someone who is an Indian. Prabhu, N.S. Prabhu, sitting in Bangalore. We do not recognize sometimes our own people until the Westerners recognize them. That's our pity, right? Shame, in a way, right? So he talked about task, and then Martin Bygett, sitting in Lancaster University, he picked up the term. And then Rod Ellis, prolific writer as he is, he has written on everything and anything. Jack Richards and Rod Ellis, they have written everything, right? So they picked it up. Content and language, integrated language learning practiced, or the ideal scenario to practice this kind of thing is the science and technology universities. And this is followed mostly in the eastern part of Europe and also in Japan and in Korea. Right. I have seen the syllabus of English language teaching, English communication in Japan, and they are mostly CLIL based. Then communicative language teaching, which most of you are familiar with, right? So communicative teaching, you teach the language for communication, spoken, written communication. Then we came from there to a kind of an integration of 4 skills. We have to combine the 4 skills, right? So we have to think about an activity. You will see in many of the language course books, there is an activity which involves 4 skills, right? Then approaches. If you look at the approaches, grammar translation method. Grammar translation method, some of us actually learn the language through grammar translation method. Is it good or bad? I will say neither bad nor good. So many of us learn the language through grammar translation method. So if that is true, then how can I say that it is bad? No, nothing is good and bad. There is no straitjacketed sort of thing. If you compare it with the communicative thing, then I would say that in grammar translation, the focus was more on writing, and in communicative approach, the focus was more on oral production of the language. Then we realized that we are teaching in a teacher-fronted manner. What is teacher-fronted manner? Because if you are an undergraduate student or a postgraduate student, your teachers never ask you that what you are going to study. They decide the syllabus, they decide the curriculum, and you are supposed to be the recipient of it. And it is teacher fronted activity. The teacher comes in the class and teaches. We increasingly realize that we should give voice to our students. So we started assessing learners' needs. What do you need to learn? Why do you need to learn? What do you lack? Wants, everything, right? Then project-based and problem-based learning. Then many of us who are learning the language, they are going to industries, and then they have different case scenarios where they have to develop a project report. You have read Shakespeare. Shakespeare is not helping you to develop a project report. So what will you do? So I have to give you some problems and I have to ask you to write. So this is a kind of a different kind of approach to writing. So writing as a product and then writing as a process. So there is a kind of a hiatus between the two, and we try to combine both. Then multilingual pedagogies. I think Otanu knows more than me. The multilingual pedagogies is something that today we talk about. British Council right now in India, sensing the central government policies, are also focusing on multilingual pedagogies, and there are people who are actually talking about multilingual pedagogies. So in multilingual pedagogies, what we are doing, we are not discarding the mother tongue of the learner, right? So look how we are going back and forth. So we are using your mother tongue to teach you a different language, right? So we can use your first language, your second language, third language. For example, your HOD was telling me that he is neither Bengali nor Oriya nor Gujarati. He is everything, right? Okay. So now think about. I'm twisting his language in a different way to suit my purposes. Now, so the different languages can facilitate another language learning. So you take the nuances of the other language in order to enrich your learning of another language. Now, thereafter came the notion of translanguaging. I am a little bit uncomfortable with the term translanguaging, because trans, if you just separate the two words, trans, what does the word trans mean?
Navigating.
Transgender. So what does it mean?
Neither here nor there.
Now, actually, what is happening, I tell you, 2 years back in a conference in IIFL, there is a famous applied linguist called Peter Grandi, right, who has written a book on pragmatics. Doing Pragmatics is Peter Grandi's book. Now, Peter Grandi and I had a heated conversation. So the point of conversation was, see, when you talk about translanguaging, bilingualism, multilingualism, all these things, these are in a very, I will not say, am I getting recorded? Okay. So if, so if I am online, I will not use the term. So the thing is, you are actually doing mixture of all these things at your own convenience, right? It was all there, but you ignored it. Now you are taking, it into consideration just because it is suiting your purpose, right? So where is Ajit Mohanty? The British Council director is looking after him, because now we have to show the government of India that we are focusing on multilingualism, no more bilingualism. So once upon a time, these people are talking about bilingualism. We're talking about bilingualism. Now they're talking about multilingualism, translanguaging. I don't know what they are going to talk about next, but the Britishers are monolinguals. But we, the Indians, are basically multilingual. For example, those who of us here in this room, they know at least 3 languages. Now, if you go to England and if you try to use a different language other than English, they will not understand. For example, China is a monolingual country. Very few people understand English. Same with Korea, same with Japan. Now, these countries, if they theorize and tell us that you should teach this way or that way, then it is our poverty, it is our lack of imagination, it is our incapacity to develop, theorize our own way of language teaching. Right? And why is this happening? Because we are not researching. We are not doing the work. For example, if you go to any corpus of the journals and you search how many Indians have written on this topic or that, you will find very few people have written. So our research, our publications are limited. Many of you are doing PhD, but how many of you are publishing in a journal where the Westerners think a kind of a standard one? We are not doing it. Somehow we are lazy. We are not, we are not less knowledgeable than them. The students they get in the UK university or US universities are the students that go from India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and other places. So, and these people, they go there, they study these things. So why not you do it in your own country? So you explore these benefits. Now, if you look at translanguaging, what is actually happening? In classroom setting, sometimes you teach English and you switch to Gujarati, right? So what happens? Sometimes because of the different valency or nuances of the term, if you use the Gujarati along with English, then the student is able to understand you better. So you are trying to enhance the students' learning of the language, of target language. Then translanguaging happens in both bilingual setup, in multilingual setup, and whether in English or in your home language, whatever they know. For example, if you go to Jharkhand, you will find that in Jharkhand, a student studying in an English medium school is learning English as the first language. But what is the student's home language or mother language is different. The student is also learning Hindi as a third language or maybe the second language, and also learning Sautali as the second language or the third language. So it's a 3-language scenario. The case is not so easy. It's a complicated one. And we have a grapevine of doing research in this area. There are some researches, but we need to do more. The researches are particularly focused on either on bilingualism or multilingualism, but you have to align it with English language teaching. So what is happening in your classroom? So you do classroom-based research, right? You will find new sort of things coming up and then document it. That's my argument. Now, why this is important, translanguaging, etc. Now, there are some research which says that it improves comprehension, language skills for bilingual, multilingual learners. If we take it for granted, then I have 2 questions for you, colored into different, into 2 different colors. I have actually marked these questions. The first is how teachers can integrate students' full linguistic repertoires to strengthen their understanding and proficiency in English, especially in multilingual and multicultural classrooms. do action research. Some of you who will be passing out and joining schools, you try to find out from your own school, with your own students, you do it, and you find out what you get, then share with your friends and colleagues teaching in a different region, see what you are getting. Then what are the methods of classroom interaction, strategies, outcomes? So what Martin Bygate is telling you, Rod Ellis is telling you, Jack Richards is telling you, David Noonan is telling you, and what you are finding in terms of effective classroom strategies and interactions will differ. But we need to document them. We are not documenting them. Just a passing remark, I tell you. We the Indians, we do practice a lot of religion. And we do believe in a kind of a liberated ritualistic practice called Tantra. I was amazed to see in 2024, Oxford University Press published a handbook, big one, handbook on Tantra studies. And there is hardly any Indian contributing any chapter to it. They are writing about Vamachari Tantra Vidya, which is prevalent in Bengal, Assam, and Myanmar. They are writing about it. We are not writing about it. So somehow we have to shake off our laziness. We have to think about these things, and we have to do research and find out our areas of strength. So the political motto of being Viksit Bharat, the political motto of being Vishwa Guru can only happen if we have many Prabhus in India, right? And to do that, if you blindly follow Noonan, Richards, it will not help, because your context is different, your learners are different. So the methodologies, the approaches they are coming up with cannot be applied in a straitjacket format to our situation. We have to think about it. You can also test whether that particular theory is applicable to your context, to your learners. That can be your PhD thesis. Right? Now, we talk about inclusivity. Strategies to promote inclusivity. Very difficult. Very difficult. It is easy to say and to do. You can do some activities, but very difficult. We can do research on this area as well. We can identify some of the strategies and micro strategies and then try to apply in classroom settings where you have learners from different backgrounds, and see whether these strategies can work inclusively or not. What sort of modifications that you need to make them work as inclusive strategies. Then equality, diversity, social justice in classrooms. Huge challenge. No course book can address this. And that's why in India, our policymakers have made education both the state subject and the central subjects. So it's both is in the concurrent list. So in every state, we have experts who say that we will actually address our regional diversity. To what extent they are able to do, I don't know. I have seen PhD theses where people talk about a particular context. For example, I am pretty sure my senior professors are here, they can guide you as well, that there are people who are studying Gujarati classrooms or syllabus in Gujarati universities or colleges. But how many of you are actually triangulating it with what's happening in the East? Or in the Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan and others. See whether you find any commonality or not. How they are addressing their part of the diversity equality and how you here in Gujarat are trying to address it. Right? And what is your theoretical basis? So, progressive curriculum, yes. We have to basically in the engineering and management colleges, we have to think about curricula where we address the intercultural interactions and also transferable skills and cultural competence. Cultural competence is important. Not many of us have a cultural competence to use the language. It requires a higher order of skills. Okay. Then I put them in a small font, but you can still see them. But these are the things in technology font which are coming up. Online education platform at the private. Many of our learners are going there. Is there any study? I have not seen one. There are so many government initiatives. SIAM. Who has studied SIAM? How many learners have learned? What was the learning outcome? There are learning outcomes. Is there any impact study? I remember, Atanu may also remember that once upon a time, Jayanti Ravi, who was the director, was the secretary at Gujarat. Yes, education. Came up with the idea of setting up language laboratories in all the institutions. And at that time, I told her that, look, this is not going to help. And if you want to do, you put it in 30 institutions, do the impact study after 1 year. Now in 2009, when I went to UK to study, then I found that even in the primary schools, there are interactive whiteboards, but no teacher is using it. No teacher is using it. Even in my university, Leeds, we had interactive whiteboards in every classrooms. Nobody was using it. I don't know what was Atanu's experience. I would say they're quite similar. Tilly Harrison, was she using it? Maybe once or twice. No. So we were using just projector and all these things, just to project it for our convenience. Okay. Then we have hybrid learning, COVID-19. It is a blessing in disguise. Many people died, I'm sorry. Our soul, we should reach out to their departing souls. But at the same time, COVID made us digitally literate. Many of my colleagues who were very much hesitant to use technology also started using technology during that period because there were no other options to reach out to our students. So we started using either WhatsApp or Google Meet or everything. Now, how many of us used it pedagogically appropriate manner? May not be a large number, a few, because that orientation was not there, right? But in a way, it was a good beginning. There were some papers published as well. But then what happened? Everything died down. Nobody is actually comparing COVID and post-COVID use of digital platforms now and then. Then you have lots of initiatives from government level, right? Aadhaar, My Government, BharatNet, Digital Payment System, UPI, wallet. If you travel to Delhi, you will find hardly any taxi driver who will give you change. If you give you 500 rupees note and the fare is 350, say, sir, UPI kar dijiye na, scanner. Right. I came by flight, so there you are also using Digi Jatra. Right. No boarding pass, nothing. Now, how this is going to affect our classrooms? We are sitting like a kind of, things like this, theater-like setting, and there is hardly any interaction between you and me. I'm talking, as if I am the recipient of knowledge and you know nothing. That is not the case. You know many things which I don't know. Who will address it? We will have to address it together. And what is the way out? Research. Unless you do research, you will not be able to innovate. Innovation does not come without research. Whether a company comes up with a product, they also do research before they introduce the product in the market and that product becomes innovative. So then artificial intelligence, 5G technology, Internet of Things applications like chatbots, marketing, data analysis, everything. For example, in my institution, what is happening? I tell you, we have, say, for example, 2,000 students who have a compulsory English course. And we do not have enough classrooms to, take them to sessions. So what we are doing, they have access to a chatbot, right? So all the data is already fed to the chatbot. So they are asking the chatbot whether about Wordsworth or Shelley or the particular poem you have in the syllabus or email writing or everything, or you are writing an email, submitting to it, it is telling you that here you are wrong or right or etc. So in some way, we are trying to address some of our challenges by using this. But that is good. Then future, you have the robotics. That is going to come in a big way. So I think I am imagining that in near future, there will be no Kalyan Chattopadhyay giving you a talk, but you will see someone standing here or someone maybe there on your screen who will be giving you a talk. Right. Now, I also looked at some of the academic journals. What sort of researches are going on there? Now, these are some of the important journals in our language teaching and teaching with technology areas. Language Learning and Technology, TESOL Quarterly, Language Teaching Research, Journal of English for Academic Purposes, Recall, Applied Linguistics, System, Computers and Education. There are many more, but I have taken as a sample some of these things. Now, what are the areas they are identifying as the areas of innovation? They are talking about, they are publishing right now articles on technology integration, learner-centered approaches, contextually relevant ELT practices, and teacher professional development. These are the major focus areas, and whatever innovations you are coming up with or practicing, they want you to document them through your publications. Now here, this is a significant part, because if you look at language learning and technology, right now, the kind of article they are publishing and what could be the future research. If you look at the future research, So for example, what are the long-term impact of mobile assisted language learning tools on proficiency, English language proficiency development and learner engagement? That could be one of the areas of research. For example, you can investigate AI, VI, AR in ELT classrooms. We need to do it in our settings and see how we are there. Then gamification's effects on various language skills development. Now, if you look at TESOL Quarterly is asking for task-based language teaching in technology integration with respect to authentic tasks development and deployment. Not just development, but also use, deployment. Then ELF's role in global communication and also effectiveness of peer feedback and collaboration. That is very important. We are very shy as teachers to take your feedback, but the peer feedback is important. Even the feedback from the faculty members are important. Collective feedback of the faculty members. How many departments in the institutions, academic institutions, take collective feedback? Right, English for academic, once again, is largely focusing on automated feedback, curriculum designs. Recall, it is computer assisted language learning journal. It is focusing more on speech production across languages and the general one, how learners interact with different technologies tools. Then in applied linguistics, they are focusing more on critical pedagogy and multilingual strategies, which I talked about. System, various types of feedback, blended learning models, computer education, mobile learning in underrepresented contexts. I have a framework of mobile learning. I'm sure within 2 to 3 months it is going to be published. So that framework can be used in this unrepresented context. Then data tracking also. So these are the key innovations that I talked about. Why future ELT research matters? Because the age demands it. We need to do more interdisciplinary collaboration. And this morning I was telling my colleagues that if we look how literature is now taught at the postgraduate or undergraduate level, we are no longer teaching. Many of the universities in India have started it. I'm not sure about this university. I'm sorry about that. And it is followed largely in the West, that we identify issues and interdisciplinary approach. So it's no longer, say for example, you identify a key text, write the character of Desdemona, no longer that sort of approach. Emerging challenges, there are lots of challenges. We need to come up with a culturally responsive teaching methods. Now that could be your PhD thesis. Many people are now researching on digital tools and AI for enhanced language acquisition. AI-powered feedback. These are some of the potential research areas. NLP meaning natural language processing. Some of the future research directions. And then finally, I will come to this. This is what ChatGPT is producing. I asked ChatGPT to produce a picture on the title of my presentation. Right? And ChatGPT came up with it. The first attempt. Then I said to ChatGPT that, okay, you have made such and such mistakes. The next attempt. This is not the end of it. अभी भी खत्म नहीं हुआ, चल रहा है. Right. I could have tried on. So just imagine our learners will try on and on. And one of the things, those who are actually depending on ChatGPT, if you have a version, paid version, I have a paid version of ChatGPT. So if you have a paid version of ChatGPT, even then, ChatGPT has never been able to produce a presentation with proper citations. It frequently misses all the citations. So the last point I would like to make is humanize. Those who are using ChatGPT, you see that they have already come up with one humanize option. So you write in ChatGPT, there is 0GPT, which will tell you that this percentage of your work is actually automated. Then you humanize it. Now, by humanizing it, I mean human intervention. Now, this human intervention will continue because otherwise these things will go on. So never ever imagine that you have a poor cognitive skills compared to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is based on language learning models, the data that we produce, we feed to it, and you don't know that the kind of environmental damage we are causing by running those servers, and how much of what is the level of the quantity of water. For example, in Texas and in other places, these AI run servers are actually wasting. Okay. So if you have any questions or any feedback, I'm here because of paucity of time. I have not covered all these things in details. So questions.
Let us begin from me.
Ah.
So the previous slide which you showed, the graphic side, this one, how do you distinguish between these three, past, present, and future? So after looking at the classroom setting, or a teacher there, or the teacher is absent, or AI is taking the place of the teacher, how do you actually explain these three graphs that you have made there?
No, I have not. Sorry, I have not made anything. I have asked ChatGPT to visualize, and what ChatGPT has done, they have created different settings. That say, for example, in the past we have this. This is the past. If you look at the picture, this is the past. Now, what is the present? Present, to see, you have to go to Bhavnagar, Dilip Barad, or to my institution. Right.
Please don't contextualize me.
No. And then if you look at future, look at the position of the books. Where are they? So, the one change that you see between present and future is less of human intervention. See, how many people were there in the classrooms, were attending, and the teacher was there. That in the present, we are going to have only students, no teacher in the class. The teacher is the machine. And then the next, every student will interact with the machine, and there will be few students who will be coming to the institution and will be interacting with the machine. The machine will be like the kiosk. At the airport, you print your boarding pass. Or you may not come to the kiosk to print your boarding pass. You can use DigiJatra to, run through the gates.
So that's what I wanted to get the input from you. So what would happen to our so-called institutions, the buildings, the infrastructure, the human power in future? That's what I wanted to lead.
To be very honest, there is no future of the the infrastructure, right? I think what is going to happen that we have to develop, we have to research and develop, and we have to prove that our cognitive abilities are much inferior to what is actually the machine is doing. The machine will provide a kind of a solution, but we will have to run the machines to our advantages. See, language is not something that the machine will automatically produce, right? So there are certain other factors and conditions which will produce the language, will contribute to the interactions. So I think that there will be some interventions, lack of students coming up in the classroom settings, but at the same time, we have to develop our own research and we have to develop our own work. Otherwise, we will actually finish everything, because otherwise there is nothing that we can talk about. See, a student will come and sit here and interact with it. So this is the past. There is a present coming up and then the future.
May I also just add a line here? Professor Mahesh, you asked about the future of the human resources. And in his latest book, Yuval Noah Harari, Nexus, he says in the next 100 years, there will not be a single human being left of the kind that we are today, which means that every human being will have some form of bionic inputs inside his body. It may be a chip, it may be some sort of a visual gadget, it may be an arm. So the human race as it exists today, and as ChatGPT is depicted, the lessening of human power inside the classrooms is very much headed for this very artificial existence that even Yuval Noah Harari had predicted in his book. Thanks.
Sir, that Elon Musk also, he is going in the, sir, here I am. Elon Musk also is going to produce some chip which can be put into the human brain so that telepathy, that virtual reality can be seen. This kind of things are going on in AI actually. Sir, I have to add one point. As you say, in the research, the Tantra's research, and there is no more Indians. For my PhD also, when I was searching on Tantra, Sadhana and Yoga also, I found that there is no book, not a single book I found from Indian, from by written by an Indian. There is David Frawley, and there is only one book from South, Mehul Hora. But the book he wrote is just the replica of David Frawley. Whatever he has written, he is just copying the same. There is nothing new. Although these are the Indian things, Indian context, but really the researchers are only from the West only.
No, one just quick counterpoint to what you said, that is, and also the idea that there will be chip inside us and we will act accordingly. You see, we know from history that even Hitler tried to create, same sort of species, right? But Hitler failed. We have to keep faith on ourselves. We will not allow this to happen. And technology, if you look at Gartner cycles, you will see that sometimes there is a hype of technology. Okay, so for example, once upon a time, the virtual reality is going up and then it is going down, and then some technologies are stabilized, some technologies are normalized, some of them are not. So today we are talking about AI. After 5 years or 10 years, we don't know what is going to happen. And in most cases, technologies are not developed for educational purposes, right? We repurpose it, we recontextualize it, we remediate it, and we will continue to do that. So I'm not sure that everything will be obliterated and we will be completely finished, but I'm sure we will find out a way. And that is human intervention and humanization.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay.
Sir, hello.
We can take the last question. Okay. Fine.
We can have questions at the lunch break. No problem.
Yes. Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Kalyan. It was indeed a thought-provoking session. What I would like to add to what was discussed, I remember Atanu Bhattacharya sir in his last session said that he quoted someone, I don't remember the name, but he said that if technology can change, oh, easy, that's okay.
Take care.
I hope you are okay. Fine. If technology can change the teacher or replace the teacher, that teacher needs immediate replacement. The point is, we as teachers will have to update ourselves with whatever is happening in our surroundings, maybe it chat GPT or other innovations. And when it comes to existential crisis, we are perfect. We teachers are perfect. We'll find a solution to it. So we have to use technology, but we'll have to use it judiciously, and we'll have to adapt to the changes happening in terms of AI or other. Otherwise, will become obsolete, as he rightly pointed out. But as always, this session was very thought-provoking, and I'm sure it has given us many thoughts to ponder upon. Thank you very much, sir. And thank you all for being patient listeners and asking questions, and the discussion may continue in the lunch break or other tea breaks. Thank you very much. So we are now going to continue with the next session. Yeah.
Vanessa, be there. You will be sharing the next.
Thank you, Sunil sir and Kalyan sir, for that very insightful and interactive session.
No.
Moving ahead with our next plenary session, we have with us Dr. Atanu Bhattacharya. Dr. Bhattacharya is the professor at the Department of English at the Central University of Gujarat. He serves as the head of the center. His research interests are specifically in the area of science fiction as it developed in Bengal. His recent book on ICT in English language education by Springer has been published in 2022. He is currently working on a book project on science fiction in Bengal with Liverpool University Press. He has been the recipient of Hornby Trust Fellowship by UK and was awarded Gaurav Chinha by Chaturdhar Vidya Mandal, an educational institute in Gujarat. To chair the session, we again welcome Dr. Kalyan Chattopadhyay. Sir, sir, I request you to kindly felicitate Dr. Bhattacharya.
Teacher.
Okay, good morning, everyone. And first of all, thanks to the English department for having me over here again. They have been kind enough to call me again and again to Surat. So it's a pleasure coming back over here again and again. So thanks to Professor Mahesh Dey and this entire team. It's like meeting old friends, making new friends. It's always a good thing. And that kind of keeps you going in academics, isn't it? That you kind of keep on renewing old friendships and make new friends every time you go to such kind of events. The chair, who is an old friend, Kalyan Chakrabarty, and again, old friends and new friends. What I'm going to do today is first apologize, because as you can see from the title, it is an echo, it's a resonance. It's called Literary Criticism in the Wilderness. And people who are interested in feminism would know that in 1974, Elaine Showalter published a very famous essay called Feminist Criticism in the Wilderness, where she said that feminist criticism has reached a space now which needs to reinvent itself in some way or the other. And it is in that famous essay, that fundamental essay in feminism, that she talked about gynocriticism. So this idea of gynocriticism, etc., researching women's writing rather than simply talking about histories of women's writing, etc., etc. So I'm drawing, so my apologies to Elaine Showalter in terms of I'm kind of plagiarizing her title a bit, changing it. But there's a reason why I'm also calling it the wilderness, because as you know, the wilderness, and that's what the picture is about, is the wilderness, right? So one of the things that is happening in literary criticism, which I think is extremely exciting, is to bring back wilderness within literary theory and criticism. And here I mean wilderness not in the terms of the negative sense of wilderness. Remember, wilderness as a term had always had negative connotations. It always meant that was something that was beyond civilization and did not have the civilizational impulse, and therefore had to be conquered, had to be changed, had to be tamed in a certain way. Okay, and this taming metaphor kind of is there in most all literary criticism and theory for a very long time, and that is what I'm trying to argue is something that is changing now. Okay, so there is a kind of an input from the wilderness, things that have not been considered to be literary for a very long time, making a kind of a comeback and challenging what really constitutes the literary. So I know there is a time constraint, so I'm kind of trying to keep myself to 30-35 minutes, if that is okay. And then we can have a discussion. So it's going to be more of points of discussion that I'm going to throw to the audience. And then hopefully we'll start talking about what needs to be done, what is the status of literary criticism in that sense. So that is what I plan to do, which, okay. Sorry. Yes. Okay. So this is the outline. So what I'm calling the wilderness is I'm placing it within this entire debate of what is sometimes known as popular. So popular literature, okay, and the so-called literary, so sometimes called high culture literature, high literature, and so-called low literature. So I'm placing this debate of the wilderness within this. And I'll try to show as we go along that this debate is a very old one. It's not something that came up just recently. And this is how literature was constructed over a period of time. And the idea of literary and what is literary was constructed over a period of time. Okay. We had a wonderful session with Professor Mahapatra yesterday, who threw this provocative question to you, and what happens to aesthetics when you go interdisciplinary? And I think one of the questions that we're going to take on as we go along today is the idea of what is popular, what is literary, and how do we really bring these two together, or is it necessary to bring them together? How do we redefine popular? How do we redefine literary, etc.? So these questions are something that are troubling literary theory in recent times. I'm therefore going to take a bit of a time to go through the various turns that happened in literary criticism and theory, a kind of a survey of what really happened. I'm really not going to go into details about that. We don't have time for that. We're going to look at continuities of certain questions that were asked long time back and some discontinuities as well. And then let's all kind of come together and think about what do we understand by criticism, what do we understand by theory, etc. So this is the general story that I'm going to tell. Now, one of the pivotal moments when this idea of the literary becomes central to what we call literary criticism and theory, and I'm not really going into Plato and Aristotle and the entire history of literary criticism in England, etc., or in Europe for that matter. So let's start over here. And in the year 1937, you have John Crowe Ransom. People who have done new criticism would know his name. He published an essay called Criticism Inc. It's a very interesting essay. Remember, INC Inc. is incorporated. It's a business, yeah? And this is what he had to say, that he said, well, literary criticism, there is a lot of literary criticism in England, but the task of literary criticism is the task of the university teacher of literature, okay? So he's making an interesting move over here. He says that literary criticism has been done by poets, and that is how the essay begins. Literary criticism has been done by philosophers, but they are not adept enough to do literary criticism. Okay. Who has the qualities to do literary criticism? And he says the university teacher of literature, the professors of English, okay, for the most part, for the erection of intelligent standards of criticism. So if you want to do literary criticism, who is the most qualified to do so? It is the English professors. Why? Why English professors and no one else? Because it is strange that nobody seems to have told us what exactly is the proper business of criticism. Understood? So criticism is a business. And that is why the essay is called Criticism Inc. Yeah. So criticism incorporated. So if criticism is a business, whose business is it? The business is that of English professors of the university. And that is one thing that he makes very clear. Because all the others, he claims, are amateurs. Okay. And this also gave rise to what we now call new criticism. And therefore you have these categories of criticism, right? So once you look at, remember new criticism mostly was focused on poetry. They hardly talked about fiction or non-fiction or anything else. But they said professors of literature are the best to judge and teach and set the standards for criticism. Okay. So now you have a certain kind of professional criticism that needs to be, so professional laws of criticism that are going to be given to you from English departments. Okay. So criticism becomes this exercise, this practice, where it is through a certain group of people, mediated through a certain group of people who are qualified enough, interested English professors who can do criticism. Yeah? And therefore, you know the entire story of new criticism. I'm not going to repeat it. So this idea of close reading, the idea of fallacies, effective, intentional, etc. So you have now categories, professional categories. And if you do not fall within those categories, then you are not a literary critic. You will not be recognized as a literary critic. And if you are to be recognized as a literary critic, these ideas of criticism will need to be followed. All right? So that is where I place the beginning of what we call modern literary criticism. Yeah? And this also did an interesting thing. And that was that, remember, many of these new critics, and I'm sure that all of you have done some amount of new criticism, focus on particular periods of history of literature. Okay, so for example, they would take up Romantic poets, or they would take up Shakespeare, the Elizabethan period, and they would mostly deal with the canonical literature, okay? Literature that were taught in syllabi. Remember, Professor Mahapatra mentioned Richards yesterday. Richards, actually, the entire book, Practical Criticism, is a series of lectures that he did. So these were actual criticism that he used to do in the class. So he would take the syllabus into the class and teach them and then document them, and then he produced a book out of it. So it was mostly literature that was already solidified around English departments. And new criticism based its criticism based on that syllabus. It was not something, so they were not only defining what criticism was, but they were also defining what literary was. Okay? And therefore distinguishing it from what later came to be called pulp or popular or non-literary. Okay? And so this distinction, my argument is, comes from this modern impulse of new criticism that came into existence at the beginning of the 20th century. Now, what happens after this? And I'll quickly go through this history because I'm sure that everyone is aware of this. And I'm calling them terms. Now, this is not my term, this is not my term. The idea of the terms comes from another literary theorist. But what I'm trying to do is I'm saying that, okay, starting from this modern criticism, what does it go through? Okay, so what are the different aspects that we can look for in criticism and theory as it traverses a certain kind of a historical trajectory? So the first term that you can start looking at, which starts challenging this notion of the English professor becoming the scholar, the modern literary critic, comes from interdisciplinary theory. As again, I'll very quickly go through this because I think Professor Mahapatra has covered this ground extensively yesterday. Remember, most of the literary theory that we come across today did not really come from English departments. They would come from other disciplines like history, philosophy, anthropology, etc. And they were kind of integrated within literary theory, okay? Or what we call literary theory. Now, what did it do primarily? So it primarily started asking uncomfortable questions, literary theory. Okay, so it started questions that were taken as givens in literary criticism and theory. So things that were taken for granted. You took for granted what an author is, what a text is, what a reader is, etc. And they started questioning these ideas of the givens. So you have the questioning of the author, you have the questioning of the text, you have the questioning of literature, you have the questioning of writing, voice, point of view, and the questioning of gender, etc. So these ideas that come kind of preloaded now starts getting questioned during this entire period, and you can place the high theory part of this period can be placed between 1960s to 1980s. Okay. And of course, all of you know this idea of subaltern, post-colonialism, etc., kind of derives its source from this spurt of literary theory that happens at this point of time. So 1960s to 1980s. So what is happening during this period is something interesting, because primarily what you have is the establishment of a certain kind of a canonical form of literary criticism, which starts getting questioned not in terms of how you do criticism, because if you look at it very closely, deconstruction, which everyone spouts about, and we had a play about it yesterday, good. Deconstruction is nothing but close reading. So if you look at it very, very carefully, deconstruction and what it is doing is close reading. It's simply repeating a new critical facet. But what is the most uncomfortable part of literary theory was it started problematizing, I'll not say questioning, problematizing the ideas that are ingrained in literary criticism, the idea of the author, the text, the reader, etc. And they started problematizing it. Now, once this happened, there is a more serious turn that starts happening around the 80s and the 90s. But before we come to that, I think it will be good to keep in mind what we mean by the popular, because we need definitions for the popular. And then we'll revisit this idea of the popular, because it is during this period, 1960s to 80s, that the popular kind of makes well, shall I say, it broke the prisons of literary theory. So what you have is the popular kind of entering the discourse in big ways. Okay, and so this entire notion of canonical literary or the canonical literary form is getting questioned constantly, because historically, philosophically, it is being shown that the canonical literary form was formed not simply by some critics talking about it or people repeating the same things again and again, but also through extreme forms of oppression. For example, post-colonialism. So when you didn't have books to teach in Calcutta University, but even before Calcutta University in Fort William College, what do you teach? Because English has never been taught anywhere else, including England. So how do you teach English as a subject? You need some textbooks. What better textbooks than literary texts? Because they are ready-made. But which literary texts to choose? You should not give dangerous ideas to these natives, yeah, because these natives will start rebelling against you. So you should choose texts that are non-dangerous and have been established over a period of time as something that can teach them language, but also teach them general values, general culture, etc. etc. Okay. So teaching of English, remember, kind of spurred the formation of the canon. So I think Professor Mahanand yesterday showed the syllabus. In fact, the syllabus that he showed was the syllabus that was used in Hindu College in 1817. It was the first college that was founded in Calcutta, not the first, but first college that was founded officially in the Calcutta. And if you have noticed that list, you will see there will be Milton, there will be Shakespeare, there will be Pope's Iliad, there would be Rasselas, which he missed out on, so Johnson's Rasselas, and you would have Pilgrim's Progress. Okay, so texts of culture and texts of language. Okay? So what you have now is, because now you have these texts, you need commentaries on that. How will students understand it? So you need literary criticism. So we need to understand that literary criticism itself comes from a certain canonical colonial impulse. Now, keeping that in mind, what happens in 1960s and 70s, these kind of questions are getting asked. That, well, it doesn't seem to be a very innocent exercise. This idea of teaching of English, this idea of teaching of literature, what is literature, etc. And after these uncomfortable questions become comfortable questions after a point of time, what you have now is this. So what were the texts that were left out? What were the texts that were supposed not to be taught, not only to the natives, but also, remember, English became a subject in Oxford in 1900, early 20th century, 1913, I think. So when English starts getting taught in England, what texts do we have? And what are the texts that are being kept out? What are the texts that are dangerous ones? Okay, and that is where popular theory about the popular in the 1960s and 80s start looking at those texts. Okay, and that is where, for example, women's writing emerges, etc., etc. Now, keeping this in mind, therefore, it is important to understand what we define as popular. Okay, because again, like many other terms, like the wilderness, popular has negative connotations. Okay, so it was always seen as something that is for the masses. If you remember the beginning of films, and there are very interesting studies in films, films were not meant for institutional studies. That is the reason that film studies was not instituted in many of the academic institutions till the 1980s. So don't think that film studies is something that began with 1895 with the showing of the coming of the train at the station by the Lumiere brothers. Film studies could become a discipline after almost 100 years, primarily because it was seen as something popular, or something of the mass entertainment. So what are you going to study? Okay. And it is here, therefore, with the coming of Raymond Williams and the Cultural Studies group in the University of Birmingham, that we have the bringing back of the popular, let's say, okay, and redefining the popular. So I'll just very quickly go through this definition. So what Raymond Williams, and this is an adaptation of his definition, he says it's a combination of beliefs, practices, and objects that make up a social structure. Okay, so popular is not simply something that is to be discarded, but it's a part of the social structure, and it's important therefore to study and what is happening in that. Now, these are texts that may not be considered literary in that sense, according to the literary model that is given, but are consumed widely. I forgot to bring that book. I right now, just a couple of weeks back, bought a book called Gujarati Pulp Fiction. How many of you have come across this book? That's because you're working on it. So there is a publication called Bluft Publication, which is taking out these publications of pulp fiction. And I was amazed to know, and I had this belief that there was no pulp fiction in Gujarati, no science fiction in Gujarati. You have a series of this pulp literature that was produced in numerous journals that were extremely popular, and these books were sold on railway stations, railway stalls, were put inside nice-looking covers of Narmad's writing or Dalpatram's writing, so that people would think that you're reading Narmad and Dalpatram, but actually we're reading M.T. Golibar, a sensational story about a woman being abducted, etc. Okay? So these are extremely common forms that circulated within the social structures. And therefore, William said it was important to study them. Okay? Because it's not that they challenge, because sometimes they also kind of reinforce social structures, but it will be important to study why are people reading them? Why are they popular? You read your Shakespeare because you don't have an option, but you would rather go back and read a Harry Potter. Yeah. So why is this an important feature? And that is where Williams and the Cultural Studies group and many other theorists started bringing back the popular into the literary domain. The second important term that, of course, happens around the 1990s is the visual term. Okay? So remember what starts happening around this period, and let me begin by asking a question. Is this a painting? Teachers are not allowed to answer. Would you consider it to be a painting? What is your idea of painting? Seems to be a photograph, right? Do you know this company, Campbell? They're very famous for producing soups. So they have tomato soup, bean soup, this soup. These are tin soups, which you can bring home. Very popular in America. It still exists. So you just need to bring that tin back and warm it and have your food. That's it. So is this a photograph of Campbell's, an advertisement? What is it? And if I tell you it is a painting, would you even believe me? No, you won't, I'm guessing. This is a painting by someone called Andy Warhol, who challenged this idea of what he called salon-produced art. He said, why do I have to follow the rules of painting to paint? Why do I need to always produce a certain kind of shade or a certain kind of texture or a certain kind of perspective? Why can't I have a photograph? And that's what he used to do. In fact, now you would probably recognize the name. Andy Warhol's most famous, most popular painting is the one, if you know of the actress Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe has a very famous picture of she's crossing the road and she's holding her skirt because there is a gust of air. Okay, and it was something that Andy Warhol created. Okay. He became a very, very popular. So what he would do is he would actually go and take pictures, bring the negatives back, and then paint on the negatives. Okay. Very popular, very well sold, became a rich man. But again, something that comes from a challenge from the popular culture. Okay? Because what he wanted to show is that art is not simply that is being produced in salons. Art is also something that is produced on the streets, the graffitis, the advertisements. These are all art. Remember, Ahmed Hussein started his career as a film poster maker. He would make posters for films. Okay, so Is that art? Is that not art? Who judges them as art, etc., etc. So what happens with the coming of the pictorial and coming back to the visual cultures again? And this is from J.W.T. Mitchell. And Mitchell has a book called Picture Theory. And this is what Mitchell has to say. He says that I want to call this shift the pictorial turn. And he traces the history of the pictorial turn. He says it begins with grammatology and his focus on writing, etc. And Frankfurt School's investigations of modernity and visual culture. Frankfurt School extensively worked on TV, on radio media, etc., etc. And with Michel Foucault's insistence on a history and theory of power and knowledge. Okay, so the visual makes a return. Now remember, the visual makes a return also in a different sense in the 1990s. And that is through internet technologies. You know, we had a wonderful session in the morning with Professor Kalyan where he talked about AI and the internet technologies. I am not very sure how many of you can even not looking at your phones. You have this uncontrollable urge after 15 minutes of listening to a person to check what is there. So most of your knowledge, it's uncontrollable. I can see that something must have buzzed. Something must have come. And I need to be right on top of it all the time because it is there. And that urge is something that we need to investigate, right? And this is a part of the popular. You really can't tell. I remember those days, and I'm sure Professor Kalyan would remember them as well. We used to have language labs where it could be written outside. No mobile phones allowed inside the lab. Okay. I'm happy that that scare is gone now, but I've still heard that engineering colleges, the students are not allowed to bring their mobile phones, etc., etc. But you really can't stop it. It's the part of the popular. You really can't do anything about it. And because your own ways of reading, your own ways of engaging with the world around you has changed. It is mediated through something else. You really can't say technology is simply a tool and we'll be able to manage it because technology does change you. Remember the greatest losses to business after mobile phones came in, especially after 2005? Can anyone guess which business lost the most? Which one? Sorry, can you be a bit louder? Retail businesses, okay. Any other business that you can think of?
Publication.
Book publication, okay. And books are doing pretty well, so they're picked up. It's watch companies.
Yeah.
People stopped buying watches because everyone could check the time on the phone. Okay. Watches are making a comeback now, but they have been rerouted now. It's a fashion statement first, or it is something that's going to help you keep your health in check. It will give you your pulse rate and heart rate and whatever rates are possible in the human body. And then, that's what the watch is for. The watch is not meant for checking time. So your concept of checking of time can be transformed. And therefore, that is what the popular can do. So please beware of people who tell you that technology is a tool. It is not a tool. It changes you in the way you interact with the world. It changes you epistemologically. It changes your ontology. It changes the way you look at reality. So it's not simply, it is a tool, it doesn't matter. If I don't have my mobile phone for 3 days, it's fine. I'm pretty sure people go into depression and they need clinical advice, etc., etc. Yeah? So it's not as simple as that. And therefore one needs to study it. If it is a part of the larger visual culture, what are people doing with it? How do we bring it back into literary criticism and theory, etc.? So the popular and the visual has different formats when we look at in literature. I thought I'll finish by 12, so 5 minutes I'll take. So 7 more minutes I have, so I'll try to finish it off in 7 minutes. So one of the things that we start thinking about is the image as text. Okay? So the text is not now confined simply to written text or to a film text or whatever, but something that the images can bring. So image itself can be considered as a text. So you don't simply have literature confined to literary, but you also have images which can be read as text. And of course, we have different kinds of theoretical formulations because of this. One of them, of course, is multimodality, which looks at internet technologies. And so when you look at an advertisement, for example, you don't simply look at the advertisement just for the image. Well, image is the first thing that draws your attention. But then you have the text that follows it. There is the positioning of where the image is. There is the design. There is the color framing. There is the color contrast. There is the size of the poster. All these are used to make an impact on you. They are not simply there just as an advertisement. And they have become more refined as we have gone along. Yeah? So now they can be beamed onto you within 5 seconds, and it still can get the message through. So images can have powerful, powerful impacts, and again, a part of the popular forms, popular literature. And one of the things that we see in literature, for example, is the graphic form. So, and I think again, Professor Mahapatra mentioned it yesterday. So how do we treat the graphic novels? Do we still treat them as plot, character, whatever, thematics? Because now we have a different format altogether. So if you look at a text like Arijit Sen's River of Stories, or Amrita Patil's Kari, or what is the third one? Sarnath Banerjee's Corridor. How do you read them? Do you simply read them as a text in a sense of a written text? Or do you also look at the interaction between the written text and the graphic and the form that is emerging with that? And if it is an interaction, how is the interaction happening, etc., etc. Now remember, and I want to insist on this, that the graphic also has a history. It is not coming out in a vacuum. Remember, within the popular culture, and I'm sure many of you, maybe not your generation, but definitely Professor Mahapatra's generation and Professor Dey's generation, we grew up reading Tinkle, Amar Chitrakatha. Your generation maybe, okay. Chandamama, Champa, Chacha Chaudhary. In Bengal, Narayan Devnath, Batul the Great. You know? So we grew up reading on this. This was our staple diet at homes. Parents would think that you will learn something if you read. Okay, they were a part of the popular visual culture. It has a long history. Amar Chitrakatha was founded in the 1960s. But it has been kept out of the theoretical modeling because it's seen as popular. It is not good enough. Now, once the graphic novels have made a comeback, it is actually drawing on the same traditions. If you look at Sarnath Banerjee's works, he constantly kind of takes you back to those days of Amar Chitrakatha, okay, in some of his ideas. He takes you back in history. You look at Vishwajyoti Ghosh's work, etc., etc., etc. Okay, it would be interesting, therefore, to trace the graphic novel, not simply as a serious literary form, but also where it stands in the spectrum of the popular. Okay, the graphic novel, remember, is still not a very popular form. They're expensive books, okay? So not many people can still buy them. But now they are coming up with new ideas of making these more popular. For example, they have anthologies now of short stories. Vishwajyoti Ghosh, in fact, edited a wonderful anthology of partition stories, all graphic, this side, that side. So it will be interesting to see how this modality develops, but we need a theoretical modeling for this, and therefore the popular needs to make a comeback within the literary field. So revisiting the popular, remember we started with the definition of popular. Interestingly, the popular was always there. Okay, And literary theory, so I'll try to finish this in 2 minutes. I promised myself I'll finish by 12. And literary theory is kind of picked up on them later. Okay? So there is always this popular form that is available, but because, as we said, for historical reasons, this distinction, this quandary between literary and the popular was created over a period of time. And suddenly we see in recent times the popular coming back as literary. And I'll give you some examples of this. Suddenly, the popular things that were very, very popular at their point of time, people didn't even consider them to be writings of any sort, have now suddenly made a comeback in forms of literary forms. Okay, I'll give you the first example. Life writing was never ever taken very seriously in literary theory till the 1970s. No one really talked about life writing. Okay. If you were going to talk about women's writing, even in life writing, you would talk about women's creative writing, because that was literary. Okay? It was only much later that life writing becomes an important aspect of now considered to be literary. Now, suddenly these texts, I'm sorry, a lot of people think that you shouldn't mix with a Bengali. Because Bengalis are generally chauvinists, you know? So they only give examples from their cultures. So all the 3 examples are from Bangla, but they have been translated into English. So I'm not giving examples. I will be giving examples from Bangla in the next slide. So Binodini Dasi's biography, autobiography, was written after, if you know Binodini Dasi, she was an actor in a very famous theatre group, in Girish Ghosh's theatre group. One of the earliest women to do theatre in 19th century. In fact, she wrote her biography after she left the theatre group, after Girish Ghosh died, in fact. And it became a popular hit because people wanted to know, what was a woman doing in theatre? What was her life like, etc. But never taken seriously. In fact, she was trashed during her lifetime, that this is not even writing. Okay. And now that this has become a part of many of the syllabi, become a part of the canon, etc. The second one is by Sarala Devi. I'm sure that some of you have come across it, people who are interested in life writing. Sarala Devi was a member of the Jora Sako Thakur family, Tagore family. And if you are aware of the history of the Tagore family has 2 parts. So one was the Brahmo Tagore family. Rabindranath Tagore belongs to the Brahmo side. But there was also a Hindu Tagore family, which did not even intermix. So they had not very good relations between each other. Sarala Devi grew up in the Hindu part. But because she was very attached to Rabindranath, she would go and visit and this and that. And very, very interesting stories again. Okay. Again, a very popular book at its own time, and now has become a classic in life writing as a genre. The third example I've given over here is by Rashomari Devi. And Rashomari Devi. Rashomari Devi is sometimes considered to be the first biography by a woman in India. We have a bit of a debate on that, but let's go along with what people say. And Rashomari Devi's Amar Jibon or My Story is again she was the mother of a very famous reformer in Bengal. So everyone wanted to know what was happening in the household. Okay? She will give us the tips of how to go around the household, which is so famous. And again, has become a part of life writing as a genre. So life writing as a genre, which was always considered to be something that is to be neglected in the literary, has made a comeback. The second is travelogues. Now, again, remember, travel writing was seen as something that people do as a kind of an entertainment. That's it. So you read it on trains and that's it, forget about it. And the 4 examples that I've given over here are again become a part of the new syllabi across universities in terms of what is really happening. The first one is the first one. It is probably the first English travelogue written by an Indian of his visit to England. Do read it. It's a wonderful text, Neil Muhammad. The second one is Fanny Potts, which when she comes to India, and records and stays in India for 11 years and records her own views of India. The third one is a Bengali lady in England, which is very, very interesting. It's by someone called Krishna Bhavani Devi. Krishna Bhavani Devi was sent over there to study medicine, spent 1 year over there. And again, a very interesting conversation between what we call Indian post-colonial encounter. So how do Indians look at England? We have heard a lot about how England or English looked at Indians, but these are stories of the other way around. So the reverse gaze, as it were. Yeah. And the fourth one, which has recently been translated by Jadavpur University, is actually the travelogue of a Bengali woman who got married to a Japanese at a wrong time, just before the First World War. Japan belonged to the enemy camp. India was a British colony. This poor Japanese gentleman used to work for the East India Company, and he was thrown out of India. He was in Calcutta. So Hariprabha Devi, who got married to Oshiro Takeda, that's her husband's name, she follows her husband to Japan, stays over there till the war gets over, and then comes back. So it's not only women traveling to the west, it's also women traveling to the east and what is happening over there, etc. So again, interesting forms of the popular making a comeback in the theoretical consciousness. Overshot the time, sorry, I'll just 2 minutes more. I'm sure everyone has read this. Crime detective fiction. In fact, some of the earliest theoretical writings about crime detective fiction came from Raymond Williams, who took this as, because if you look at the 19th century, maximum number of texts are this genre. I'm not talking about literary, but the literary has resonances of that. You find them in Dickens. Who is Fagin in Oliver Twist? It's the underbelly, it's the underworld. Pocket mark, Fagin, Oliver Twist. He picks pockets, that's what he's trying to do. You look at David Copperfield and the underbelly. So this entire pulp fiction did have a major influence on literary writings because they were very, very popular. Okay, it was called pulp fiction because it was published in pulp paper. It should be trashed immediately. Yeah. And I'm sure the so-called Bengali Bhadralok, the Bhadralok, the elite intellectual class of Bengal, in their households would have Rabindranath Tagore, Sharat Chandra, Bankim Chandra, and Feluda, and Bankesh Bakshi, in the same shelf probably. So what you have is within cultural formation, the mixing of the popular and the mixing of the literary was always happening. It was only within the theoretical premises that we had kept it kind of separate. And again, so these kind of genres are making a comeback. So crime and detective fiction, I'm not going to go through all of this, but I would like to talk about the last one. 1 minute, Manoranjan Bhattacharya. This is called Hukka Kashi Samagra. It's probably the only detective in the entire history of Indian detective fiction who is actually a Japanese. Born and brought up in Bengal, therefore can speak Bangla. But he's a Japanese character. All right. The last thing that I wanted to say, and this I'll take 1 more minute, is speculative fiction, which again was an extremely popular genre in Bengal, but we need a whole different session for this. And again, is being widely researched now. So the return of the speculative, especially after Margaret Atwood's essay on speculative fiction and speculative writing, has returned to the theoretical fold in a certain sense. I'll stop over here. And of course, there are continuities, and I'm sure these are literary, right? You will say Calcutta Chromosome is literary. But remember, it's a popular genre. It's a science fiction. Yeah. It's Amitabh Ghosh, so probably literary, but used as a very, very popular form, science fiction. I'm sure you know Mandila Padmanabhan's Harvest. Again, won the Onassis Award for the best play, but uses a very popular form, etc. So I'll just go through this, run through this. And it is seen across Asia. So I'm just not going to talk about India, Eurasian futurisms, etc., etc. So coming back to, and this is the last one, criticism in the wilderness. What I'm trying to say is that what we are seeing now is that literary criticism, which was established, or modern literary criticism, which was established not only to create standards of criticism, but also standards of literature, are being problematized through the popular now. So what we are doing in literary criticism and literary theory is to kind of also look at popular forms and how they interacted with the so-called literary forms. In fact, Amitabh Ghosh says this. He says, and I would read this out, indeed, it could even be said that fiction that deals with climate change is almost by definition not of the kind that is taken seriously. Now, climate change is a serious issue. But the moment you write fiction about climate change, the mere mention of the subject is often enough to relegate a novel or a short story to a genre of science fiction. So the moment you write that, you say, popular science fiction. You don't have to talk about it. Yeah. It is as though in the literary imagination, climate change, when somehow akin to extraterrestrials or interplanetary travel, is happening to you, it has always been imagined as something happening to someone else. Okay. It's happening to you. And that is probably the inherent danger of making this distinction between the theoretical literary and the theoretical popular. With these, I'll stop, and therefore, what I'm suggesting is we need to trace this category where these intersections happen. And the popular genres, of course, offer very, very interesting interdisciplinary critical insights. I have not even talked about retellings, adaptations. Look at 2000 onwards, what is happening. You have Amish Tripathi and Ashwin Sanghi, and so all sorts of retellings, reinterpretations of stories, etc. happening. And remember, this is also a part of the literary. I mean, you look at Pratibha Ray's retelling of Draupadi, Yagi Singh. Yeah? So it is a part of the literary, but it's also part of the popular. But there's lots of retellings happening over there. It will be interesting to see what was happening. And as I said, popular can turn into literary and can act as a counterfoil to major literary genres. Again, should be a part of the critical history that we need to draw upon. So when we're looking at critical histories, we really can't say this is popular, so we're not going to look into it. So probably time to look at those intersections that happen at certain point of historical junctures. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Atanu, for a highly interactive and mesmerizing presentation, I would say. I'm sure that you have lots of questions in your mind. And if I am privileged to sum up his talk, then I would say that he was trying to problematize between the literary and the popular. So in our culture, popular and literary sometimes overlapped, existed side by side, but there was a lack of recognition. And now in the literary criticism also, we are increasingly recognizing the popular as literary. So that the binary is somehow fading. We have to take into consideration of that. One thing I was wondering why Atanu did not mention what is literature by Japal Sartre. But anyway, we can discuss about this, and now the session is open for questions.
I was really happy to, when I was going through your presentation, because I had worked in this field as well. And when you were talking about the change or shift from popular to literary, it reminded me of some Hindi popular writers,
Ved Prakash.
especially Gulshan Nanda, if you have heard, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And he wrote many novels, Hindi novels, and later it was, yeah, movies were produced and super hit, blockbuster movies. And I was just surprised that till the time he wrote in textual form it was there, never be read in like literary form. But after it was like picturized, and when the people started writing about like movie critics kind of thing, then it was like kind of recognized as a literary text. So it was a long shift. It took time because after 90s only I could see some of the people who started working in the film as a film critic. They started writing and publishing about those films, not about again the text. So how do you see this kind of phenomenon? Because it's a kind of again a problem is there, still there.
So one of the things that I didn't, we can keep on discussing this. So one of the things that I didn't talk about is the intermediality. So many of these popular texts actually traveled across media. Okay, and that can be seen even today. So for example, a large number of popular games became films and later even have been translated into transformed into texts. Now, intermediality is central to this entire concern. So one of the, it would be very common, if you look at the history of comics, for example, many of the comics drew from, and you must have seen that famous thing in comics called Dishum, Fatak, so there's the explosion, Zuboom. Now, these terms actually came from pulp fiction. So in order to produce a certain kind of excitement in writing, so they would actually write it in the text, boom, patak, etc., etc., and then they would be visualized in a certain form. Gulshan Nanda is a very good example because, and not only Gulshan Nanda, Ved Prakash in Hindi, for example, extremely popular writer. But we can discuss this later because I do have an article on this. So people have worked on this now. So they have worked on Ved Prakash, and so if you know someone called C.M. Naeem, he has worked on Urdu crime fiction. Now, if you work on Urdu crime fiction, then you can't really take away because a large amount of that was also Hindi crime fiction. So there's a book on that, and he does discuss it in details.
Thank you, sir, for your lecture. Sir, I have a question in my mind regarding the graphic narrative. Madhubani painting is there. Madhubani painting we have. And, it also comes in the category of that because it's a story of Ram, such a ritualistic things are there in the is that thing come in the category of popular?
That's a very interesting question. I mean, it's a question that requires more attention. That's what I'm trying to get at. So, just like Madhubani paintings in Bihar, you will have fur in Rajasthan. You know fur paintings. You have the Chitrakar tradition in Bengal, Pattochitru, for example, in Odisha. Okay, and these are forms of storytelling. Now, this is another thing that we need to think about. I didn't want to get into this, but since you have brought this question up, so even today, when we talk about narratives, whether they be popular or literary, there seems to be an implicit assumption that we will keep religious narratives out, and narratives should be secular in nature, within quotes. Yeah? So there is an analysis of a lot of secular narratives because, analyzing religious narratives can get into trouble. Okay, so that's one of the reasons. But are they narratives? Yes, they are. Should they be analyzed? Yes. Because remember, Madhubani paintings, I'll just give you an example, very quick example. In Bengal, in the 19th century, a specific form of art developed called Kalighat paintings. Kalighat paintings is nothing like you have seen, because this is the first form of painting in India. It uses traditional forms, traditional colors, including vegetable oils, etc. But it is the first form of painting that is talking about contemporary social life. So Kalighat paintings will have babus. Kalighat paintings will have English officers, which is unlike anything else. Now, how do you look at this? It's a social commentary. In fact, there are a series on a very famous murder that happens in Tarakeshwar, a place in Bengal, where a woman is murdered because she was having an affair with the Mahant of Tarakeshwar. And the husband comes to know about it, kills it. And there is a series of paintings in Kalighat paintings. It tells you a narrative, but is it graphic? Is it not? Something to think about.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your penetrating session. And being a Bengali, I can relate these things. So it was really joyful for me. So without further delay, let's welcome to our next speaker, Dr. Rishikesh Kumar Singh. Rishikesh Singh is a poet, an eco-critic, a researcher and a traveler, an environmentalist and an ecological facilitator. He is the president cum director of Ecosophical Foundation for the Study of Literature and Environment and the joint secretary of ASLE India. He is also the CEO and MD of Elitcos Academy Private Limited, a premier institution of explicit learning and discourse. Professionally, he is a consultant clinical psychologist as well as an English faculty based in New Delhi. He pursued his research in eco-criticism and explored the various unheeded facets of this particular field of study. He also initiated with the concept of bibliotherapy in India in 2012 that he practiced on those people who faced natural calamities and were distressed with ecophobia. His research articles and poems have been published in various international and national journals such as the Literary Truths, the University News, News India, the Criterion, the Literary Voyage, Writers, Editors, and Critics, Galaxy Research Scholars, and many more. He is the recipient of the Best Writer Award for his story Hasrat in 2003 in Allahabad. Now to chair the session, we welcome Dr. Mahesh Dev, Professor and Head of the Department of English at B. Narma South Gujarat University. Now I request sir to felicitate him. Thank you, sir. Now let's move on to the session. The dance is all yours.
Okay. It's on. So first of all, I thank Professor Day who invited me. And earlier I was to be online, but from I just landed from online to offline because I could not resist myself to meet you all. And the theme also, the theme of the conference, because I always believe to work something in new, and I'm sure most of the research scholars must have been working in the new areas of English studies. So you can see the title. It's about eco-theater, eco-musicology. Unfortunately, in our Indian universities, these areas are not, much of its concern. So, but in Western universities, yes, they are being developed as a separate, a kind of, a completely distinctive area of studies, which is not being done here. Some of the people are working, some of the research theses are there, but in reality, in like field, we are not working in fact. So this is what we are trying, I personally trying to take all these accounts into the field. First, we need to collect the data, and that collection is a kind of research. What sir in the morning told that we are not actually doing research. So we need to do research in all these new areas. Then we can enhance our Indian English writings. So I begin with a very famous and very this quotation, which is very close to my heart as well. And it's by a very contemporary a Turkish playwright, Mehmet Murat Yildiz. And he writes extensively in the field of eco-theater. And before coming here, he just wished me that, okay, because we are in touch, and because we are planning to have a kind of a workshop with him here in India. So you can see nature is a theater. When one great player leaves the scene, another great player immediately enters. The play always continues excellently. Don't you think this is kind of a very close and perfect and subtle example of this eco theater, what we say? We have theaters, we have so many theater groups in India, all over the part of India, but specialized in eco theater, there are just a few. We can count on fingers. So when we talk about eco theater, definitely it's really hard and challenging to represent the nature on the stage. So what could be the kind of design, the ecological design we can create to study in this field? So the first one is
eco-dramatology. And eco-dramaturgy is a kind of a research wing, you can say so. It's not a practical kind of wing of where eco-theater works. It's a kind of research wing where we analyze all the tools and techniques to be used on the stage. In the OAT, OAT must be aware of open air theater. Most of the universities have. JNU, we were privileged to have such kind of OATs, or in the lap of nature itself. So Ecosophical Theatre Society, which is in Delhi, and has an extended wing for eco-theatre dedicated to rehearse and research in the field of eco-dramaturgy, known as Vasundhara Natya Mandal. So this is a particular kind of dedicated wing where we are working in eco-theatre. Okay, then there is another term, because these are the designs actually, as I told. The first design is like eco-dramaturgy, that is a research wing. Then eco-scenography. Eco-scenography, it's a kind of, mostly it's associated with the eco-films or docudrama. In South India, you must be aware of the Tinai movement. It was started by Nirmal Selvamani. He was the professor of English, Central University of Tamil Nadu, Tanjore. So he initiated actually the Tinai movement. Tinai, the term which is used in Tolkappiyam, Tamil text. So that was a practical thing he did. So here, and after this movement, there was not much done in this field. And it is actually this eco-scenography is to rethink traditional design practices and reinterpret materials to embrace the possibilities of sustainable future. The second objective is to integrate ecological principles into all stages of scenographic thinking and production. And also a very interesting project I'm going to tell. This is called the Living Stage, an eco-scenographic project that combines stage design, permaculture, and community engagement to create a recyclable, biodegradable, and edible performance space. This was actually done by Dr. Tanja Beer. She is from Australia. She is an ecological designer and community artist. You can see this is a kind of representation she has in this eco-scenography. And the other picture you can see here, this is also another example of eco-scenography. This is the way we can represent nature on the stage. So it is a very innovative kind of project she's doing, and she's also associate professor of English. Actually, see, this is how the English people are extending their areas of research, because she is a theatrist. So that's why she is experimenting. And the third tool, now we will talk about eco-drama or eco-theater. It is dedicated, as I told you, to performance primarily, and secondly, maybe the secondary initiative will be involve the theories. But the first thing is that to act. So eco-drama or eco-theater is mainly about acting performances on the stage. The fourth one, the term, which is environmental theater, it's a kind of umbrella term, which has been used by Richard Schechner, a university professor emeritus at the Tisch School of the Arts, New York University. You see, as I told you that eco-theater groups in India, a very few theater groups are there. I really admire one of them, that is Under the Sal Tree. It's actually annual theater festival in the hamlet of Rampur in Goalpara district of Assam. I visited this place, and I was a part of this festival. You see how they perform, and it's beautifully named because you can see the sal trees. So it's being performed by the artist under this sal tree, and that's why it is named like this. And this is another picture of this. They are very active. Every year it is usually happens in October month. Now there is another group, Shri Muthappan Velattan group. It's again a very renowned Theyyam performance group. Theyyam, you must be aware of this term if you have watched Kantara movie. See, when I mentioned Kantara, some guesses were there, but if I say Theyyam, nobody come to know. Just because we are very much associated with this, as Atman sir was telling, that visual representation. So Kantara, the same thing was performed. And it is actually the story of the connection between temple, the god, and the mangroves of Malabar areas. Mangroves. So it's a kind of a story which tells that the same story is actually, imitated in the movie, but in some other way, the movie masala things were there. So this group, and the third group, as I mentioned, we are also working in Delhi, Ecosophical Theatre Society. And in this particular society, we are very much concerned about those theatre forms which have not been practiced much in India. Eco theatre, as we discussed, and the second was subaltern theatre, and the theatre of the commons and the community theatre. So in fact, we can say that it's a kind of anti-elitist movement, theatre movement in India, and also a non-classical art form. So we don't have any grudges against the classical form of theatre. It must be there, but yes, we are not concerned about those kind of classical things. And elitist movement, it's not actually required at all now, at least for the sake of this time. We need to change the theatre. You see here, and that's why what could be the tools? So we practice like in the form of forum theatre. If you are aware of this, forum theatre is like it was introduced by Augusto Boal, and it was called, the book was produced, Theatre of the Oppressed. And actually it was for the people who were like marginalized, subaltern people. But how I connect it with the ecology, because I feel that nowadays, or this era, this nature is also suffering. That is also marginalized. So that's why this kind of forum theatre is needed. Forum theatre is quite interesting theatre. In fact, if we had a kind of earlier like preparation, I just wanted to had a kind of skit over here to show that how theatre forum works and how it can help like to prevention of nature. This is a kind of act. It's a kind of organization in Bangalore, near Bangalore. So they perform this kind of even a person De Silva from Sri Lanka. He's also a good practitioner of this forum theatre. There is other tools also, like the image theatre is the same thing, but slightly different from forum theatre. Because here, what happens? The actor becomes the props, the actor. There is no need to use some other kind of prop. So like if we have to present some trees or something like related to nature, so our body will act there like that. And the third one is invisible theatre. This is something in with the growth of social media, you must have seen that the sudden surprises people used to do in the streets, that's actually came from this invisible theatre. Like, to act suddenly and surprise the people and see their reaction. Yes, so that's actually came from this particular act. But unfortunately, again, in theatre form, it's not being practiced because it's easy to make reels and easy to share and see and enjoy. But in the theatre form, we need to work hard actually, that how we create such kind of theatrical mode. So here, I mentioned here the concept of a spect actor. Actually, this concept was given by Boal only, where he merged two terms, a spectator and actor. Like you all are audience, spectators, and here somebody are like, performing. But unfortunately, what happens, whatever goes on the theater, on the stage, we don't react. So Boal wanted the audience to react. Like in the mid of the play, you come and change the, the whatever is going on there. So that actually I wanted to present here if we would have time. But next time definitely we will plan, because it really makes the story, interesting. And it also changes the conclusion. Though he was like, blamed also that you are changing the soul of the kind of, already written text. But he said, no, text must be there. The beginning shows the end, actually. You know that if somebody like, if suppose related to gender issues, wife battering is going on in any kind of, act on the stage. So we will sit ideally, we will just watch. No, we should come ahead and stop them. That what actually he tried to explain. So that's why he added these two, and he made a term like we need to have spectators. Okay. And after this, the other concept, which is known as eco-musicology. This is unfortunately again our least explored area in Indian academia, eco-musicology. Because, and you need not to be a musician, I tell you, yes, but you need to have some sense of, music. You need to understand, you need to feel the music. That is enough. And yes, you must be a person from literary background, then only you can do, or also ecological facilitator, ecological, like, if you have ecological consciousness, then also you can practice in this. So the relationship between nature and music, it's again not a new thing. It's existing since ages, perpetual and perennial. So it represents the cultural bonhomie between natural environment and music and their coexistence with humanity. The term was coined by Raymond Murray Sheffer. Yes, he was a musician, a Canadian composer, but also an environmentalist. So eco-musicology primarily includes nature, music, and communities. So nature, music, and communities, these three are merged, and then we can discuss about this eco-musicology perfectly. Definitely, it defines the ethnicity particularly. So that's why another branch which is included with this, that is ethnomusicology. This incident I personally felt when I traveled to Andaman Nicobar Island. So there is a Wandur beach. It's actually a Wandur village. So there, the particular community over there, like fishing and agricultural communities. So there are certain natural phenomenon. They are habitual of that, and based on that, their day-to-day lives are completely set. So a new person, a newcomer, when he or she enters that area, they cannot recognize that thing. But yes, if you are a good observer, you can feel that how nature tells you something. With that, you actually decide that how to, set a particular day-to-day life activities. So it's nearby Wandur Beach. It's very silent, very calm most of the times, like pin drop silence kind of appearance. So there actually, what happens when it's about to rain, you can hear the sound almost 5 minutes before or maybe earlier. And whoever has experience, they can only identify that it's about to rain. Usually visitors, they won't understand this, but the people who are working there, who are living there, the inhabitants of that particular area, they are very much familiar. So this could be also studied. Actually, in India, we have lots of possibilities, in fact, but we don't explore. So let's open ourselves, especially the researchers, the young researchers, they need to go in the field and visit. Due to that, as I discussing with Ashok sir, I told that yes, we are into theorization because it is needed. See how much we are traveling, seeing and observing, that should be documented actually. So in the form of theory, it's a kind of, I always feel it's just giving a term and securing it. Because when we keep something to secure, we put some particular name on the file or something like that. So definitely it must be theorized. And while theorizing, we need to be very particular that we again recheck, because we cannot go to only that this Wandur beach and then we documented and we kept it somewhere and we consider that we have done something good, some good research. That's why I prefer to say we need to do theorization with circular theorization. Circular theorization where we visit the field, come with a particular idea and theorize it, term it, and then again go to some other field. And again, we try to see the same thing is there or not, some similarity is there or not. So finding such kind of, like data, and if we collect this data and comparatively we study, after that, we finalize it. So circularization of theories, this is based on the theory of praxis. Praxis where theory and action both are together. So an interesting person, I'm going to talk about her. If we have time, can I show you, show them like a kind of short video?
How many minutes?
It's actually, I think 4 to 5 minutes. It's actually of Olena Utai. She's also very famous. As I told you, most of you have seen her videos. Actually, she participated in America Got Talent also. So she is from Yakutsk area of Russia. Yakutsk, famously known for the woolly mammoths. Yeah. So she belongs to that place. She's a performer on Zomas. She says like, Khomash. This is actually a Russian ancient jawhar. So it is really interesting to see her performing, because she amalgamates like, her community culture, musical practice, as well as the representation of nature. Actually, she gets ready in a kind of, horse appearance, and she uses that harp, and she blows actually, and then it actually when she presents, you feel like you are somewhere in the like very far from this, crowded area, and you go in the lap of the nature. It's a very nice presentation. I would definitely, show right after this. So there are two famous performances: Blessing of Nature and Call of Shaman. Shamans, you are familiar with. I have a good experience, I can say, in Sikkim. Wanjhakri Falls. If you've heard Wanjhakri Falls, there you can also, they're called Jhakris actually. Shamans are called Jhakris. So they also perform so many, like, practices they have. Some people understand that you kind of, Jadu Tona type. Yes, but actually it's not. Like as somebody was asking about Tantra study, so people again understand Tantra something related to black magic or something like that. So, and for Tantra, I add here, you must search for Kashmiri writers, thinkers. A lot of them have worked. One of my colleagues, he is working in this field. So, okay. Now, again, therapeutic aspects of this practice, how it works, because you know that music heals us, and also so does the nature. So nature and music both are actually, they perform as healer. So if both come together, you understand the impact. Here I mentioned kind of Japanese practice, which is called forest bathing. In Japanese, it's called Shinrin Yoku. And Kala Ramesh is, a good practitioner in India. She's from Pune and Chennai. She travels between, and she's really, fantastic. If like she spent her complete like the whole life for like this, haiku and such kind of, Japanese practices. So here also again, it's a kind of practice where we are taken again back to the forests. Forest bathing is like just spend time with the nature. You can include music as well. So I think I have. Could you play through this very quickly?
That will come here. It's actually on live actually.
Okay.
Everything is set from here.
Okay. Achha.
It should be there on your device. Otherwise, you don't work.
Okay, that's fine.
You just go through your slides and wind up. Rest of the things you can share with us.
Okay, fine, no issue. So next time, definitely we will plan for a workshop, because workshops are more interactive, and there we can go with such plays and such videos, especially meant for this particular like theories, eco-musicology, eco-theater. So I think we have some time, or we should conclude.
Have discussion if you are finished.
Okay, fine. So if you, I think we should stop here, or maybe some other, some important questions are there we can discuss. Actually, Professor Aaron Allen, he has worked extensively in this particular area, and a very good book he has produced with the same name, Eco-musicology. And he put some questions, and I just tried to find the answers of these questions in Indian context. So I think it's quite relevant questions. You can see like, how does nature inform music, and what can the study of music tell us about humans, other species, the built environment, the natural world, constructed nature, and their connections. The other question we can discuss, like, does musicology adapt us better to life on Earth, or does it sometimes estrange us from life? And the last question, not the least, but yes, is the environmental crisis relevant to music? And more importantly, is musicology relevant to solving it? So I stop here, and we are open for the discussions if you have. Thank you.
So right, that it's good that we winded up on time.
Before time.
Before time.
Actually, I had two videos, in fact. I just wanted to include, but it's okay.
But
Next
now
time.
you-
Yeah.
Thank you, Rishikesh, for that very enlightening presentation, and lots of new phrases and new words we got to see about eco-musicology, lots of theater workshops on eco and the environment. So I also was wondering if circular fashion should also be included in a presentation like this, where it's also known as brown fashion, where garments are produced with zero waste. There's vegetables and plant roots and plant parts which are used for completely organic dyes, and the process uses minimum amount of water, and ultimately what is taken from the earth goes back to the earth in a pure form without any chemicals entering into the earth.
Okay.
So circular fashion is, I think, a very important aspect of managing the environment, because fashion is producing so many garments and ultimately they're using for landfills, landfills. So I was just thinking that we could also add something like circular fashion to this.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a relevant suggestion, in fact, because in theater we are actually in need of such things, especially for clothes and some other props. So we should definitely use such kind of biodegradable things. Yeah.
I just want to know that where the spectators are involving themselves into the theater. Is this like that breaking the fourth wall with French critic Denis Diderot saying, because there is already a theory, theater of the theory. There is breaking the fourth wall. So there is also the audience can engage themselves. So is this the same thing?
It's actually not the same because see, actually his concern is just to make the audience understand that how we can act in a given situation. This is not actually, changing the story is not his, concern. He just wants to show that how it could come to an end, which is satisfactory end. So that is, and the theory you are talking about, that's different actually. Yeah.
Change the script and all that.
Yeah, it will change. That is the question I told you, because it is always asked that then the story will be different. Because whatever the written story we have, it will be completely changed, because first time, suppose one spectator, one audience will change the story, then the second will come, he or she will change according to his own way. But yes, actually, that while giving the training to the people for this forum theater, what is especially what we care for, that the story must be in the same line. It should not be completely beyond the basic concept. Suppose if we are talking about some natural hazard or calamities we are trying to show, and suddenly we include something related to gender, something related beyond that particular concern, so that is not to be done. Actually, that's why, yes, a person is free, like an audience is free according to his or her own way. But that's why within the audience, some actors are also being, seated, and they come and change to show that how it could be changed. But still, it leaves the question, as you asked, that finally, what will be the end? So the motive is to end with a kind of satisfactory end. Satisfactory end, again, it is, you can say, it is a subjective thing, but we try to be objective the maximum we can, because we cannot be objective finally completely, because when Boal was talking about, he also, whenever he finishes any show, it was just according to whatever the need for like gender justice or environmental protection, or whatever the to be thing, like it should be, it must be, that kind of thing he wanted to present through the script. So
thank you, sir. Sir, I have a question regarding
Directly ask the question. Narrating is
yeah, sure.
Sir, that you talked about that eco theater. What are the themes in the eco theater? What are the subjects that they discuss?
Okay. You have seen some of the slides where I have told that we try to represent nature the maximum we can on the stage, or we go to the nature and there we can perform. Eco theater is not meant just to be the classical form or the elitist form of stage representation. It is also open for open air theaters. It is also open for directly in the jungles, in the forests. We perform anywhere, even in the public areas as well.
No, but he's not asking the performance side. He's asking the thematic side.
As a thematic side. Okay, so theme is like just nature and human relationship, mostly.
Most of the theaters are talking about that in the nature.
No. Actually, direct representation is not there.
Nature and environment both are different things. Are you talking about the environment, representation of environment in that, or the representation of nature as a general?
No. Again, eco-criticism, I tell you, actually what happens, eco-criticism is always misinterpreted, mostly in Indian context, because where we find out some like trees, rivers, and all these natural things, we say that, okay, here we will found eco-criticism. This is not at all eco-criticism. So this is what I mean to say. We need to understand its relationship with human being, Okay, not the abstract representation.
Yes, sir. In Bengal, there is Jan Sanskriti Center, who is talking, who talks about this theater of operations, and in that also there the audience come in the middle of the theater, and they.
That is Forum Theater.
Yes,
Yes.
Jan
Yeah.
Sanskriti Center.
Okay. Good to know. Yeah, good to know.
Can I, sorry, is there a question from there?
Acha, you please go ahead, sir. Yeah.
Just a quick comment. I'm just expressing my uneasiness with this binary between what you are calling classical theatre or elitist theatre and this thing. Because if you look at classical theatre in India, many of them were actually performed not on proscenium theatre at all. So what I'm assuming that you're assuming that classical theatre is stage-based theatre.
Exactly.
Proscenium theatre.
And rule bound.
But proscenium theatre, remember, is something that comes much later to India. We don't have proscenium theatre. So even if you go back to Natashastra, for example, the third chapter of Natashastra talks about construction of a stage, the sanctification of a stage, the materials that are going to be used on the stage, and then the dismantling of the stage after the performance. There's a whole cycle. So it's not that you just simply have a stage and it's there for ages. Proscenium theatre is a concept that comes to us from the Europeans with green rooms and all this. So when we say classical theatre, I think Indian classical theatre would definitely include what you are calling eco theatre, because there are a lot of ecological elements within classical theatre itself. If you look at a Thea performance or look at a Kathakali performance, they would never be ideally be performed on a proscenium stage, on a classical stage at all.
Yeah, Ratan Thiam, as you mentioned, Ratan Thiam, yeah. Ratan Thiam and Ibrahim Alkazi, yeah, they did experiments, yes. And even his daughter, Elena Alkazi, she was the NST director as well. So they all definitely, because that was a kind of generation, they tried to do something, different from the so-called, that's why I'm telling you, so-called classical setup. So like I give you example, whenever you watch, you just see that Meghdootam, performance of Meghdootam on the stage. So there, like I have a particular experience. It was completely classical, means you have to follow all the norms, you have to follow each and every rules, as you have told, like mentioned in Natya Shastra also. But they don't go beyond the setup rules. Actually, forum theater and this eco theater is completely beyond all these things. Like you are a free being, just present what is needed and what should be and what must be introduced in the society. Though some rules are there, but not in that form. That is why I am against that. That not against, in fact, we are not practicing actually. So that's why non-classical I told. Not anti, but anti-elitist, because it is, I think, it's need of the hour. That we should stop thinking. Actually, Mahesh Dattani, I remember one of the most elitist kind of, theatrist. So he actually once joined us. So the same question came. I said, you be a part of our organization. So he said that how it is possible. I have to change myself. So I said, okay, fine. Because see, we don't accept, if we are talking about changes, so we should not at the compromisation level. So that's why we are not actually adopting it as a kind of, research studies, area of research studies, in fact. So, yeah.
Can you consider it in folk literature? Because in
folk is always, yes. That's why I didn't mention folk is always like eco theater, I can say, yes.
That everywhere such performances are being
Exactly. Actually, in folk culture or indigenous culture, what happens? They never separate themselves from nature. They are always the part. They feel that they are the part of. You remember the kind of circles, like two circles, like two different entities. One shows human being, and the second environment, nature. According to Western analysis, two different entities. But Indian, the one bigger circle and the other one inside. and the inside one is human, representing human, and the bigger one is the environment. So this is how we, take the nature or the environment in our culture.
And sir, even when you
Just a minute, just a minute. Have a control. Somebody is here with the mic. You raise your hand and then you will have a number.
no, let them ask.
I don't think he is mic.
That's the question.
Instantly,
Yeah.